Hello again, everyone. Tonight I'm going to present to you some recent music book purchases I've made, and the first of these is not this book. I've showed you this book in a previous video about Randy Bachman, but Randy has a new book out. It's called Vinyl Tap Stories, and here in Canada, and I guess across the internet, Randy does a weekly radio show on the CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. And he plays his favorite songs, and he interacts with his audience through email and whatever, and tells stories. And he's had a very rich and varied career that goes back to the 1960s, and touring in the States in the 1960s, and in Canada and throughout the world, with both the Guess Who and with Bachman Turner Overdrive. So this book is not as thick as his other biography. It's only a couple hundred pages, but it's full of really interesting stories about the music industry, about his favorite songs, about artists that he's met and recorded with, and he's had a wonderful life. So it's a very interesting read. These other books I've picked up second-hand pretty much. This is the Rolling Stone Record Review by the editors of Rolling Stone. This came out in 1971, and it's a paperback. It's about 500 pages long, and it's full of the original record reviews from Rolling Stone magazine between, say, 1967, when Rolling Stone was founded, up to about 1970. Vintage area for classic rock, so it has reviews of Hendrix albums, Cream albums, the original reviews that appeared in Rolling Stone. This is a bit of a funny one. It's called Rock and Roll, the Devil's Diversion by Bob Larson. I guess it was Next Library book or something. There's Bob Larson with his Fender, looks like a Fender Jaguar guitar. And Bob Larson, he's become a born-again Christian, and he does an analysis of the evils of rock and roll, including songs like Louie Louie, or Louie Louie, and Hendrix, and all the artists of the late 60s. This book came out in the early 70s. I think about 1970, actually. And The Evils of Rock and Roll. This one I picked up in the store last week. It was on sale, and I've been looking at this one for a while. It's a biography of Led Zeppelin, When the Giants Walked the Earth, by a writer by the name of Mick Wall. And it's probably the most recent Led Zeppelin biography. Lots of pictures. There's Jimmy there back in the Yardbirds days. But it is, let's see, it's about 500 pages long. It should be a really interesting read. I haven't read it yet, but can't wait. I found this at the library book sale. Somebody had just dropped it off in the library box, and they didn't want to keep it for whatever reason, so it doesn't even have a library card or sticker or anything on it. But it's Keith Richards' Life. It's a hardback edition. Might be out in paperback now. But this is the original hardback. I'm not the world's biggest Stones fan. I'm a Beatle fan more than a Stones fan. I used to think they had great singles, but their albums are always kind of dicey. But this should be a really good read. Next we have some Doors books. Strange Days, My Life with and Without Jim Morrison by Patricia Keneally, who also goes by the name of Patricia Keneally Morrison. She is kind of I think a wacko in a way, but trying to cash in on the Doors and Morrison. This came out back in the 90s. And Patricia Keneally did engage in a pagan or Celtic wedding ceremony with Jim Morrison, and kind of considers Morrison to be her spiritual spouse or something, and she actually went to the lengths of changing her name, adding Morrison as his surname. So it's kind of a cash-in fluff book, I suppose. And I don't even think it has an index in the back. Nope, no index. If a book doesn't have a really good index, then I don't think as highly of it as a book with a really good index. One of my little rules of thumb. This is called The Doors, Dance on Fire, by a writer by the name of Ross Clark. And it's almost like a photo book in a way. Oh, there is a lot of content though too. Morrison, A Feast of Friends by Frank Lisciandro. And I think, from my memory, I think Frank Lisciandro was going to be involved with Morrison to do a movie or something called A Feast of Friends at one time, probably about 1968 or 69. And as a Doors associate, he's released this book, I think, back in the 90s. It's fairly light going, more of a picture book than anything else. And I picked up the following at this book here. I picked up at the library book dump. It's called The Rock Yearbook, 1987, edited by Tom Hibbert, featuring Billboard and Music Week charts, and it's just a complete analysis and rundown of the year 1987. So there's piles and piles of new wave stuff and whatever. It's a British book, and I remember I have some other years, I think, from the 80s too, when they had a book for each year. This is another British book. It's called The NME, which is New Musical Express Rock and Roll Decades, the 70s, a complete chronicle, rock and roll chronicle of the 70s. And it just goes year by year, basically, showing some of these articles are from New Musical Express newspaper. It used to be a weekly paper back in the 70s. I think it might still be a weekly paper. Keith Richards' Toronto bust, 1977. Boston, More Than a Feeling. It's got some charts and things in it. Just a top-down survey of the 1970s. Oh, this isn't a music book. But I did get this at the book sale. It's called Science Fiction Encyclopedia, Illustrated Encyclopedia. And this is from 1996. I just thought it was a cool book. It's all about sci-fi. Sci-fi books. Classics of the 1970s. Classics of the Golden Age. If you're into sci-fi, this is very cool. I only paid $1 for it. Look at those spaceships. That's fantastic. City life in the future. Aren't we living like that now? There's a picture from Metropolis there. Future wars. Fun, fun. 1950s, the flying saucers. So cool. This book I picked up in our local bookstore recently. It's The Beatles. Then there is music by Tim Hill. Rare photographs, ephemera, and day-to-day timeline from the Daily Mail, British newspaper. And this book also, it's been out for about 3 or 4 years, but it used to have a different cover than this. This is like a day-to-day or day-by-day history of the Beatles. But the photographs in this book are fantastic. Just one of the best Beatles photo books I've ever seen. I mean, the day-to-day history of the Beatles is just a bit of a bonus because the photographs are really wonderful in here. Hard Day's Night. Just really good stuff. That's Tim Hill, The Beatles, Then There Was Music. Thanks for watching.